This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.
Hey everybody, it's John Hall, the senior editor of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. I'm in Pennsylvania, not far from Valley Forge, and sitting across from me at Root Down Brewing is the lead brewer, Steve Bischoff, who last year, 2018, won 2 medals at GABF, gold for the American IPA category, silver in the Goza category, and then as such was named mid-size brewery here at Root Down, and then you were named mid-size brewer. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
We're going to talk about all things IPA, Goza, and just beer in general in a minute. But first, let me tell everybody that as the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling, G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, and dedication to their customers' craft. G&D is committed to cold, whether you operate a brew pub or a large-scale production brewery. Contact G&D Chillers today at 1-800-555-0973 or reach out online at gdchillers.com and mention this podcast, the Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine podcast, and receive up to $1,000 worth of glycol with the purchase of any new G&D chiller. And also, you can turn your fridge into the best craft beer bar around with the Tavour app. Get access to hard-to-find, 100% independent craft beer from 47 states. Only buy the beers you want and skip the ones you don't. Ship any amount of beer, any amount of your hand-picked beer to your doorstep for one flat fee. That's right, any amount. Download the free Tavour app today and get $10 in beer money with the code BREWING. Steve, so right off the bat, I'm curious because 3 big medals, or 3 big awards at GABF, and silver is nothing to, so-so silver, as the Simpsons would say, but gold in IPA, and then mid-sized brewery, mid-sized brewer. What was the first beer that you can credit with getting you on your journey as a lead brewer today, and as somebody who has now stood on the stage at the Colorado Convention Center, gotten the fist bump from Charlie? Is there a beer that you can look back on and say, that sort of sparked my interest and got me on my path?
You mean in general, craft beer in general?
Or beer in general.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't have to be craft. It's
many years ago, I was always a Yingling lager drinker, and then basically found Victory Brewing Company. A friend took me over there, had a Hop Devil, kind of blew my mind. What is this stuff?
Yeah.
And very quickly grew on me, and then kind of went from there. Got into the dark beers, the hoppy beers. It took me a little while to get into the Belgian-style barrel-aged lambics and gooses and stuff like that. But it took me quite a while to get into that. But yeah, definitely Victory was a turning point in my beer drinking career.
And,
life,
and Hop Devil too, yeah.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
That's sort of a big jump, though, of going from lager, Yingling lager, to...
Yeah, at first I wasn't sure if I liked it.
Sure, yeah.
It was very different.
But it opened up these sort of possibilities to you.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And then, were you a brewer at this time, or were you...
No,
what were you thinking
absolutely
about?
Not. I used to actually want to be a chef. That's kind of how I got into the whole homebrewing aspect of things, and I've always been sort of a craftsman. That's been instilled into me by my father and my mother both as well. Always making something, fixing something, creating, getting your hands on it, and getting dirty. So, I'm walking through a kitchen supply store one year, and I see the little, I won't name the name, but Mr. Beverage kit. And,
like a Mr. Beer kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't want to use their name.
Plastic thing? No, that's fine. Wait, what?
I don't know.
It's the product that has launched 1,000 careers in the industry.
Right.
Back at the old magazine, we wrote a piece about this, of how this seemingly innocuous piece of plastic at Bed Bath & Beyond has...
It looked like something fun to do on a Saturday. And so I asked for it for a Christmas present for my brothers, basically, my 2 brothers. And they, unbeknownst to me, they didn't get me this Mr. Beer kit. They actually went and got me a full 5-gallon setup from a real,
No crap,
you know,
really?
the plastic buckets and all that stuff. It's still just an entry-level kit, but
Wow.
I was expecting a little Mr. Beer kit, and it'll take me a couple hours or whatever. And I get this big kit, and it was very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it took
that
me a
can be
long time.
intimidating if you're thinking
I was
about
like, well,
one
that's
thing.
not really what I wanted. You know, that looks like a lot of work. And it kind of sat in my closet for pretty close to a year, which is probably not very good for the hops and the yeast and whatever, but it doesn't matter. This is my first batch, you know, so I finally got around
I'm sure
to
your
making
closet
it.
was temperature controlled.
Oh,
and,
yeah, ready to
Yeah,
go.
the humidifier going, yeah.
So I finally got around to pulling it out and collecting the bottles I was going to need, and I brewed my first batch, and it probably tasted awful, but I was like, oh my gosh, I just made beer. This is amazing.
But what-
And that's the epiphany that everybody has, I think, with their first beer. Like, look what I just did, you know.
And it's kind of fun, right? And
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
what prompted you on that day after a year?
No
was
real
just-
answer.
it
I
was
just
just
kind
the
of
day?
okay. Yeah, we're just gonna do it. Let's do it. Finally, get around to doing it, and kind of thing. And sometimes I often procrastinate and put projects off to the side. And like, I was like, you know, this one is a fun project. It's not work, so let's go do it.
Yeah.
And I went and did it, and just from there, just took off. And that was probably about 15 years ago.
So, originally thinking that you were going to be in a kitchen, now you wound up in a brew house. And you've worked at other breweries before Root Down. It's only 2 years old here, but
Correct, yeah.
and notably Sly Fox.
Yeah, I was there for 6 years.
Yeah.
Started off in the warehouse, like very bottom level, entry level position, as a quote unquote brewer's assistant. But I was driving a truck around
Sure.
and humping kegs all day long. I wasn't really doing anything related to brewing. It's more just delivering beer, getting raw materials for the brewers, things like that. But after a year and a half doing that, I moved up into the cellar. You know, I would do some packaging here and there, help on the can line, help kegs, whatever, helpful kegs. But after a year and a half of warehouse guy, I moved up into the cellar.
Yeah.
I kind of skipped being a packaging guy, which is typically an entry-level position in any other brewery. So I went right to the cellar, and I was trained there, and I ran the cellar for 2 years, and I loved it, and I did a good job, and made some improvements over the previous cellarman, and they said, hey, do you want to get into the brew house? Absolutely. So worked my way into the brew house. So by the time I left, there was 4 lead brewers there at Sly Fox, and I had been brewing as a lead brewer, running the 40-barrel brew house for 2 years. Not being the lead brewer, one of lead brewers.
Sure.
I want to make that clear. Like, there was a team of people.
Sure.
It wasn't just me.
There's multiple leads.
Right. And you could either start at 5 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You're there all hours of the day, the night, whatever, and you do it. And that's what you do. And I did that for years, yeah. And then Mike, I used to work for Mike Hamara at the homebrew store in downtown.
And Mike's the owner here at
Mike's
Root
the
Down.
owner at Root Down, yes.
Yeah.
And he approached me and said, hey, I'm going to be opening this brewery called Root Down. You want to be a part of it? And I said, absolutely. Let's do it. And here we are. So.
I want to jump back just really quick, though, because cellar work is one of these unsung hero jobs
Oh, sure.
of brewing company,
Yeah.
of breweries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not sexy. It's not really visible to people in the way that the brewing process might be, or here I am in my rubber boots with my mash paddle, making beer.
The guy making the wort, he's like, the rock star.
Yeah.
And the packaging
cellar guy's
guys
like the
are
bass player. Yeah.
And the cellar guy don't even know what. Yeah, exactly. He's just in the background. No one even knows about him, but he's there making everything happen. You learn a lot. It's quite different from just making, just brew beer or just packaging. There's a whole different aspect, and it's all necessary, obviously, in the whole process.
Yeah. When there are folks, there's still folks who listen to this podcast, I hope, who are planning on opening up a brewery, though. I mean, what would be your advice as far as working in the cellar?
As far as working in the cellar, number one, cleanliness and sanitation. Absolutely 100%. I mean, you can't be harvesting yeast in a dirty environment, for example. And especially a smaller brewery, you don't always have the resources to do the things that the bigger breweries are doing. So you might have to make some compromises. Oh, we have to open the man way to throw yeast in there instead of pitching it cone to cone or whatever.
Yeah.
There's different things you have to be careful of. So number one, you have to be clean.
Yeah.
Number one, absolutely. And I'm sure most people are aware of that, but I still want to emphasize that.
Sure.
Yeah. You can't cut corners. Very easily mess up not just one batch, but multiple batches by one mistake.
It sets a bad precedent as well. I think if you get away with it once, maybe you don't get caught. I might have said this on the show before, but like Tony Bennett once gave a great quote where he said he still practices singing every day, and he says that if he skips a day, people might not notice. If he skips 2 days, like the really true people might start to notice. But then by the time you skip 3 days, and it's obviously not totally true, but if you skip 3 days, everybody's going to notice.
Yes, you can't rest on your laurels and get lazy.
Right? Exactly,
yeah, right.
and that's sort of the thing, is that the breweries that I think continue to do well, have dedicated folks in the cellar who are staying true to it.
Sure, attention to detail.
Yeah.
Stick to your process. Stick to your SOPs.
Yeah.
There's a reason they've been developed.
Yeah. I mean, for me, in all the breweries that I've visited, I pay attention to the cleanliness level, and there's certain, places where, like Sierra Nevada or New Glarus or even Cape Cod Beer, some of these other places, you could drop a fried egg on the floor and you can pick it up and eat it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's other places where it's just like, before you can even reach down and pick it up, the roaches have gotten it. So it's, don't be that place.
I actually had that conversation last week. We were shipping kegs to our wholesaler, and the truck driver sat down on the ledge in the wall in the cellar, and he's like, "Oh wow, this floor is dirty." He's just kind of busting my chops, and I said, "Are you kidding me? I will eat off that floor. I know how clean that floor is, and I wasn't kidding. Like, I will literally just eat right off of that floor."
That's a good. I mean, that's a. Every brewer should probably, strive to that. And, at some point, I imagine that there's going to be a beer dinner where people just eat off of the floor. It sounds like a Dogfish Head thing.
That's the new thing. That's the new trend.
Yeah. Sam's leading brewery floor meals. Sam, if you do that, just let me know so I can be busy that night. So, I'm always curious, though, brewers, unless, you have a stake in the place, I think are nomadic by nature, or not always looking, but open to the possibility of new ventures and new opportunities because of what it can bring, I guess both personally and professionally, a level of satisfaction. And so Sly Fox, great brewery, and been around for 25 years, 30 years at this point, right? I mean, it's
opened in 95, I think.
Yeah,
it was.
So I mean, just a staple of this region.
Sure.
I grew up in Jersey. I've known them forever, and I enjoy the beers that they make. And around here, at least, it's a well-known brand. And I'm sure if you say to people "Oh, I worked at Sly Fox," people would,
"Oh yeah, we know Sly Fox." There's always really cool events they do as well. So
yeah, well, the goat races, the Maibach, and everything
there's
else
always
that they
something
do.
going on out there. Yep.
What was the appeal to join a startup?
So as great as a brewery as Sly Fox is, and I always said they had a really broad portfolio and they did everything really, really well true to style. There wasn't a whole lot of personal input from me or from the other brewers. I mean, occasionally you get a little bit of freedom here and there. I also ran the 15-barrel brew pub in Kimberton, so I got to do my alt beer recipe there once, and that was a lot of fun. But I wanted more of that. So when I was approached by Mike, it was kind of like, dude, you can come do your own thing all the time. And he's like, that's like having my own, gigantic homebrew kit. For back to homebrew, lots of people say, well, do you homebrew now? Like, no, why should I? These are all my recipes now. So when I was working at Sly Fox,
it's not like being a chef where you're still going to cook at home. You're still going to make an egg at home, kind of thing. You're not going to fire up the kettle on Saturday morning for 5
it's
gallons.
Not as exciting anymore. I mean, it is still exciting to brew a beer every day, but I'm like, when I go home, I want to do something else.
And you have this great binder that you brought out with you of all of your old homebrew recipes, and I mean, there's 100 pages in there.
There's a whole other binder at home too. That's the second binder.
But
take notes.
But it's that creative passion of
looking for something new.
You remember making the alt once because it stands out in your mind, but there has to, there's that desire to.
You want your input. You want to create. Like I said at the beginning, I've always been a craftsman. My parents have instilled that in me. I want to create. I want to do something. If I'm just sitting around doing nothing, I get stagnant and bored, and I start getting stir crazy. I need to do something new.
Yeah.
Or improve what I've been doing. You can't just hit that plateau and cruise.
No.
So you got to be doing something new all the time. For me. For my own sanity.
All right. Well, I want to start talking about beers in just a second, but first, let me just tell everybody out there that Clarion Lubricants, where balancing barley and hops is your expertise, food-grade lubricants is theirs. The team at Clarion knows when it comes to making great beer, you're the expert, and when it comes to supplying food-grade lubricants backed by service-oriented professionals, they're the experts. Clarion will work with you to create an efficient lubrication program that helps protect your brewery. To speak with an expert, dial 1-855-MY-CLARION. That's 1-855-692-5274, or visit clarionlubricants.com. Clarion Lubricants, the experts that experts trust. And also, Ska Fabricating is the craft industry's leading choice for packaging line automation, specializing in depalletizing, repalletizing, conveyance, rinsing, drying, fill detection, and date coding. SkaFab has over 600 installations in breweries, wineries, and distilleries worldwide. With a reliable team of engineers dedicated to fast, reliable customer service, you can count on them to provide systems custom-tailored for your specific needs. Contact SkaFab today at area code 970-403-8562 or reach out online at skafabricating.com. Once upon a time, Steve Bischoff, lead brewer here at Root Down Brewing Company in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. The American IPA category at GABF was like the gold standard of the GABF medals. Out of the 70, 80, however many medals people would pass out, the BA would pass out every year in Denver. Everybody sort of stood in line and waited with bated breath for the American IPA, and it was always the best picture at the Oscars kind of thing. Yeah. Last year, 2018, they added the hazy, juicy and or hazy IPA, kind of thing, juicy and or hazy double IPA, juicy and or hazy pale ale. And that category is now the biggest category. And like
last year was the first time.
Year out of the gate, and so suddenly like American IPA sort of became this quaint little relic.
It's the redheaded stepchild,
almost, which is weird. And so that's you. Last year, you won it for Bine, this beer that I have in front of me.
Delicious looking beer. Look at that.
God, it is. It's clear. I can actually, as I'm holding it up to the window, I can see the traffic outside through the beer as well. It's this wonderful, bright golden, fantastic lacing on the glass. A little, nice little foamy head on this as well. One, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
2, did you guys enter into the hazy juicy category?
No.
Okay.
So we entered 4 beers last year. The IPA, Bine IPA, the Salty by Nature Goza. We entered the Pilsner, our Pilsner, into the category, but that didn't do so well. And then also our Helles, our Lowbridge Lager, which I believe we're going to re-enter all those again this year. And
okay.
we can do a 5th this year as well. So we'll probably do something hazy as well. But to me, the IPA is like the only one that really mattered. It's always been my favorite style, IPAs, American IPAs.
Well, if you came up on Hop Devil.
Right. Even Hop Devil, like as my drinking progressed over the years, I kind of got away from that because it was a little too much on the caramel malty side for me. That was kind of
going back
what
into
I was
that
working
sort of
into.
Like British, almost like Sierra Pale kind of. Yeah,
it's more of an East Coast style. Or an English style,
East Coast like Harpoon, you mean? Like early East Coast.
Right. So if you look through my homebrew binder over there, most of the beers are IPAs, and they're always trying to get lighter and like cleaner instead of that heavy. I I don't know how to describe it, but you'll lose the drinkability in an IPA if it gets to be too much of any one character, too much hops, too much malt, too much sweetness, too much alcohol. So to me, I wanted to make like a quote-unquote sessionable IPA without being a session IPA.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I've always worked on at home as a home brewer. And then once we opened up Root Down here, I had the opportunities to do it on a big scale, and work on my IPA recipe. But I already had a pretty good head start from my home brewing, so I kind of knew where I wanted to go. There's no crystal malt in the recipe. I do use dextrose to help thin it out, and I concentrate a lot on how I use my hops and where I use my hops. I don't just overload them and keep saying more is better. I use
So talk to me about that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So I do a small bittering addition because you want to have some hops in the boil in the beginning, but I don't want to develop all my bitterness at that point. So I kind of work backwards. I'll figure out my aroma additions, and then how much more IBUs do I need? Make that up in the bittering addition. I'm sure a lot of people do the same thing, obviously, but the varieties that you use make a difference too. Like I didn't really like certain varieties boiled as long. I would get a different character that I didn't like. So they would be reserved for 0 minute or whirlpool additions. Played around with different timings like 10, 5, 0 minute additions. I kind of settled in at 7. I like 7. It was just a random number and it works for me. That's what I like. So yeah, it would just overload at the end, but still achieve my bitterness. It's still assertively bitter, but it's a clean bitterness as well. It's not an overly resinous, not overly grassy character.
What are the hops that are in this?
In the Bine,
Yeah.
so we use Warrior for bittering. It's a very clean bittering hop. And there's Centennial, there's Simcoe. No, sorry, there was Simcoe. That got pulled out. We put Mosaic instead. So Centennial, Mosaic, Amarillo, and Citra.
So you're using two of the modern hops that are typically associated with the New England style these days as well.
The Citra and the Mosaic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that goes a long way. And it also sort of speaks to consumer preferences as well.
Yeah, they're great hops. I love the aroma that you get out of them. I'm not a huge fan of the hazy styles because they're a little on the sweeter side, but I always love smelling them. They always have a fantastic aroma, in my opinion.
The Amarillo adds a lot to this.
Yeah, it's just in the whirlpool and the dry hop. That's one of the hops I don't like to boil.
So talk to me about that. Like when you're doing your trial and error versus the boil and whirlpool, what was showing up, in the case of Amarillo
that was something I learned more on the homebrewing side.
Okay.
Just for my, all my notes.
Yeah.
That's why you take notes. So you can look back. What did I do that I didn't like? What did I do that I did like? But yeah, we originally, the original batch, the first couple batches had Amarillo in it and Simcoe, like I was saying. And then there was a slight progression. It was pretty much the same timing of everything, was just different varieties I was playing around with. Mm-hmm. Same overall bittering. And then we settled in that. We really like that little bit of that grapefruity orange character that comes from Amarillo. It's a little piney too.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty distinctive hop. And we don't use a whole lot of it in there. It's mostly Citra and Mosaic. And the Centennial is even kind of a background note to me.
Yeah.
But Centennial is like a very clean hop profile to build upon. It can certainly do well all on its own, but I think it plays well with others.
Yeah. And
as most hops do.
I think the layering is important though when it comes to some of these things as well, because right off the bat, and I have a pint of it in front of me right now, is what's left of a pint in front of me, but it's I was getting Citra and Mosaic, but it took me 3 or 4 sips in to really figure out that's also what I was tasting, because it was so layered, as opposed to some of the hazy juicy or some of the other ones that use it where it's a blunt instrument. And those are two very assertive hops, especially Mosaic. This just doesn't have that. It reveals itself over time. It's to mix bad metaphors, it's the peeling of an onion kind of thing.
Okay.
It's many layers.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that I think is probably stood out for the judges as well. Of this is a beer that it's not showing its hand at the first sip. Like you have to have at least a good couple of ounces of it.
Yeah.
Were there judges' notes on that? Because I don't know how many people know about the GABF judging, but you get notes back from the judges, at least first round.
So the notes actually weren't that impressive, quite honestly.
Sure.
If you, and it's probably because there was 311 entries in the American IPA category this year.
It's mostly notes on round one. I've been a judge in the past, and the rule is don't die on the hill. It's you got to bang them out as fast as you can. Yeah.
And you can't save all. Not every IPA can be amazing.
Yeah.
But one of them needs to be the winner. And I'm sure there's a lot of them were pretty damn close. And it's probably really hard categories to judge. But the notes were like, it's okay. And I actually got better feedback, like more impressive notes on my Goza, the silver. And I was like, well, I want to see what the gold silver was, or the gold Goza was.
Do you know who won that year?
I don't recall. Okay. I don't recall.
If I had done my research, I would have had that for you, but I
probably
don't have
should
that
know
encyclopedic knowledge. So it's.
But if you read the Goza notes, you're like, wow, this is a fantastic beer. I want another one. And you read the IPA notes, and it was like, it's a decent IPA, but that won gold. So it's kind of weird.
I want to talk about Goza in just a second, but let's just finish out, gold medal IPA. What yeast are you using?
Chico, USO5. We use dry yeast. I was very opposed to it in the beginning, but you know what? It works, and it works well. And I used it a lot when I was homebrewing, so there's no reason why we can't use it on this bigger scale. Dry yeast works.
And then as far as, are you doing anything, is this just city water that you're doing? Are you treating it in any way, shape, or form?
I use gypsum for my American IPA.
Okay.
We do other salt additions for other beers. But yeah, we don't really mess with the water too much. We have a good water source. Why mess with it if you don't need to? I can make a great Pilsner with this water. So that's a testament to how good this water is. You don't need to play with it. It's good to go. We just filter it. We run it through our carbon filter.
All right, so let's talk about Goza then. So silver, as the Simpsons would say, better than shameful bronze. As it were, it's such a fun style that I think is so misunderstood still these days. Fel Allen, who wrote a great book about Goza, was on the show, I think during GABF last year.
Okay.
So right before you won, he and I sat down to talk about his book and what he had learned about that style over time. What stands out to you as a medal-winning brewer in that?
Well, the reason I like the Salty by Nature as an example of the Goza, it's well balanced. Mm-hmm. It's drinkable. It's not overly salty. It's not overly tart. I think it's just kind of a well-crafted beer, honestly. And apparently other people agreed. But there are plenty of examples out there that are just so tart you can only have one, or they're so salty that it doesn't really taste like beer anymore.
It's not salt water. Like you don't want. And I think that's what people think of the first time that they
That's a big misconception too. I think it is. Goza isn't intentionally salty. The town it originated in had salty water. Mm-hmm. So if we're trying to recreate their beer, we need to add salt.
Yeah,
they're not in Leipzig. They're not putting salt into their beer to do this. That's their water.
Yeah. Although I have been to parts of the country where there are salt shakers on the bar where people will add salt to.
Interesting.
The northern Dakotas and it's sort of a weird old mining thing apparently.
Okay.
Yeah. As it were, but so where do you find the balance then?
On your palate,
Okay, but you're the one who's making the beer and then putting it out there, so it's your palate that then dictates what people are going to taste. So what do you look for then? Like, where's the balance for you?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, is it like pornography, like you know it when you see it kind of thing, or is it?
Okay. Interesting reference. Yeah, I mean,
it's an old saying. I'm not making that up right now. It's
But yeah, exactly. You know when you see you know, like, wow, this is a really good beer. I didn't think I was going to like it at first. It was actually Mike's recipe.
Okay.
And we started brewing it, and you know, we had to dial back the salt. You know, our first version wasn't exactly where we wanted.
What kind
it,
of salt did you guys use?
We're using sea salt. Nothing
Okay.
fancy. It's just plain sea salt.
Yeah.
We're
That's
not
what
using,
Val
like-
was talking about as well. Like, you don't have to
doesn't-
pink
yeah.
Himalayan, all
Right.
of this other,
Yeah.
you know, fleur de
You're
sel.
not going to taste the difference. I mean, the difference will be subtle between pink salt and white salt, you know. But I'm sure there's people out there that swear by their pink salt, and that's
Of
fine.
course.
But it gets to be more gimmicky than anything else, if you ask me.
Well, the gold medal winner last year was 2 of Tarts from Upland Brewing Company out in Bloomington, Indiana. So I don't know what kind of salt they used or what they did or what. But
That
yeah.
apparently was better salt.
So those are 2 relatively classic styles that you've medaled for. I mean, Goza is in vogue right now, but is sort of a, you know, it's
Very
not,
popular. Yeah, everybody's
Yeah, it's
adding
very
fruit
popular
to
right
it
now.
and, you know, different things.
And then, but then you also entered a Pilsner, and then you also entered a Helles, and that to me sort of speaks to you're trying to brew more traditional beers than what's in vogue right now.
Sure, yeah. I'm really proud of the large beer list that we have. We know there's a lot of variety on it.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
one
we have
like there's
barrel
a
aged-
dozen or so taps that I'm looking at right now. Yeah,
We have barrel-aged sours. We have stouts. I don't think we have any stout on right now, actually. But, you know, we're all over the place. We do a couple different lagers, you know, filtered, unfiltered, IPAs, pale ales, Kolsch. We do an alt beer, like I was talking about earlier. We do our alt beer. I brought my recipe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still pretty close to the same recipe. You know, subtle differences.
enough to get you out of that non-compete. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It's more of what we could actually get our hands on. Different hops and
I don't know if we've talked about alt beer before. We've talked a ton about lagers and everything else, but like, what do you love about an alt?
I like the biggest thing that I like about an alt, aside from drinking it, is that it's not really popular. No one else does it.
Yeah.
So
Very
everybody
few
comes in, they
people
say,
do
"What
it,
is
yeah.
an alt beer?" And then you have to explain it to them, or you get the opportunity to explain it to them, and a customer now learns about a new style of beer that they may have never known or never knew they were going to like it. Often,
Isn't Rogue Dead Guy? Is that an alt? I want to say that
I
it
do not
is.
know. That's
I'm going to get so many angry letters to John Hall at beerandbrewing.com. No, I think it is. It was like one of those things where people don't necessarily think of it as that because it's like so ubiquitous. But like,
sure,
yeah.
but you know, there aren't a whole lot of alt beers out there either,
no.
too. So
and when was the last time you had a
well,
Dead Guy?
that's
So,
definitely
like, yeah.
not an alt beer because what? No, I mean,
Yeah,
how do you
hell
really
knows
know?
these days?
Yeah,
There's
right.
one guy sitting at a bar in Portland right now who, yeah.
But yeah, I like the alt beer because it's like an opportunity to expand somebody else's drinking horizons.
So how do you sell that? How do you, when I walk in and I'm a Haze bro, or you know, all I want is if I'm me and I am a Pilsner or a lager when you have it on, how do you sell me on an alt?
So it's malty.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people that come in, they say they don't like hoppy beers. I'm like, well, I got the perfect beer for you. You know, it's, ours was called three-legged rabbit because it's not very hoppy.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Mom, for naming that.
Did your mom name that beer?
Yeah, she did.
All right.
I didn't think Mike was gonna like it, but he loved it. So the name stuck.
It's actually a pretty good name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you take it to beer events, and it's kind of fun. People go, "What is this three-legged rabbit?" And you explain it to them, and either their eyes glaze over, and you know they just walk away, or they stand there and crack it up because they're actually thinking about what you just said.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a different style. Oftentimes, people say they don't really like beer. You know, there's a couple different styles that I always go refer people to, and I don't really like beer. I like wine. Okay, well, have you had tried like a Goza? Have you tried an alt beer? Have you tried a saison? Have you tried a stout? You know, there's different things. People think of beer as like Miller Lite.
Sure.
And, oh, I hate that. Well, I'm sure you do because it tastes.
Yeah.
It's not very good.
use
There's nothing
3
exciting
hops.
in it. You know,
Miller Lite uses 3 hops. It's
three
cool.
hop cones.
Yeah. Triple hop brute. So you sell it that way though, and then people kind of come through and go for it. Yeah.
And most people have a pint and they like it, but they're going to go back to their hazy stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But some people get it and they don't drink anything else, and they're sad when it's gone.
Yeah.
And they ask me all year long, "When's that coming back? When's that coming back?" And it's
Do you
not
do
a,
it
it's not a
seasonally?
huge seller, so we try and do it in the fall. And I get the
Yeah.
other thing is I get a huge yield out of it because it's not very hoppy, so that there's not a lot of loss.
Yeah.
In the brew house side. So I have a whole bunch of kegs that I'm sitting on for a while. So it does last a while.
Sure.
Which is good sometimes. But yeah, it tends to be a fall beer, a seasonal release. But yeah, and people do get excited when it comes back, but not enough people.
So on those two beers, because of those two beers, silver for Goes and gold for the Bine American IPA, you guys were named Mid-Sized Brewery of the Year, and then you got the title of Mid-Sized Brewer. And there's a technical term when I read that to you right before we started recording, and what is it officially for?
It's the mid-sized brew pub brewmaster of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's based on points. Honestly, it's so we got, I forget exactly what the numbers are, but you get a certain amount of points for the gold and a certain amount of points for the silver, and then in your production size, so we're up to 1,500 barrels a year.
Okay.
We were like right at 1,500 barrels.
That's pretty impressive
That was
after
the
2
size.
years.
Yeah. When we pretty much opened up with that production level, and we haven't slowed or grown a whole lot either.
Okay.
We're doing two or three brews a week, usually 2, and it hasn't strayed very much.
Okay.
Even with distribution and
Yeah.
opening a second location now, we're still brewing about the same right now.
But when you read that mid-sized brewer, the description, and brewmaster is part of that, you immediately were like, "But I'm the lead brewer here." Like
I call myself a lead brewer, a head brewer.
I mean, you downplayed it like so fast
Instantly?
that like I didn't have a chance to even question on it. But then I challenged you a little bit on this of the term and the word brewmaster.
Yes.
Why don't you call yourself that?
Well, number one, I haven't had any formal education. I haven't gone to any brewing schools. Everything's been learned either through home brewing or from working on big equipment at Sly Fox. But if you call yourself a master, it kind of says like, I know everything and there's nothing else to learn. And I'm learning stuff every day. Often surprised by what I learn, but you're still learning.
Yeah.
So it's basically keeping my head from blowing up and say I'm the master, and no, I'm not. I'm just some guy making beer. That's all I am. I just happened to make a really good beer last year. I mean, I hope I make it every day, but yeah, I'm not a master.
The word gets thrown around a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
People, to me, it's about ego, machismo. I'm the master. Look what I did. Like, well, that's great. Do it again. Repeat it, and is it going to taste the same next month?
Yeah.
Then you're getting closer to being a master. A lot of people, they call themselves a brewmaster, but they have never brewed that same beer twice, ever. And there's a lot of these little guys that are doing that, and that's fine if that's your model, but you're not really a master. You're just assembling ingredients at that point.
And that's sort of the thing when it comes to, going back to your part on being a chef, right? There's a difference between being, a Michelin star chef or a master chef versus, a cook,
Right.
as it were, or somebody who just, it's,
Yeah, someone who's a chef has been in the industry for years, and they've probably had formal training, and they've been around.
And they're creating, and they're growing, and they're,
Right, and they're not just, I'm just making the same ham sandwich every day or whatever. They're doing something different.
What are you still excited to learn?
Anything. I'm always interested in something. So like recently I'm getting into making sourdough bread, for example.
Okay.
And that's a lot of fun. I'm trying to learn how to make the best bread. Nothing to do with brewing, really, but it's along the same lines. You have yeast and you have grains. You're creating something that provides happiness and sustenance to people.
Yeah.
So I like that. But so there's always something going on. As far as the brewing industry, what I like to learn, there's always new techniques that are coming out, especially with this, in recent history, the whole haze craze. Everybody's trying to make haze on purpose. And so it's always, you talk to another brewer, well, what do you do? to try and make this, because a lot of the brewers I talk to are having a lot of troubles keeping their beer hazy, because for years and years and years we've strived for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, take everything you know and throw it out the window and do all these bad brewing practices essentially. And so you like to compare notes.
Yeah.
What messed up thing are you doing? and it's kind of refreshing when you talk to other brewers, and not one of them, like the serious brewers, likes the style.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, well, we do it because we have to. And I'm like, well, all right, do we really have to though? Anymore? I mean,
but I mean, the ones who are doing it right, I think, are the ones who, have figured out some new world processes, where you're getting, a lot of what's desirable about those styles. People talk about, Trillium, for example. I mean, they centrifuge everything. Like, it's not, like their cans aren't going to blow up on you,
right.
Likely.
Right.
Like they've.
You can still.
You
do
have
it,
the aesthetic,
right.
but you don't necessarily have the risk.
Right.
that comes with it. And I guess the smaller you are, the harder that certainly is.
I think the larger you are, the harder it is to make these batches, because they need a quick turnaround. They can't you can't sit in a cold box for months.
Well, to make the smaller you are, the harder it is to make them like shelf stable and to make them.
Oh yeah, sure. You don't have the resources, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right. In a minute, I'm going to ask you what you have learned professionally that you wish you could have told your young home brewer self. But first, I want to thank our sponsors that made this episode possible. First, there's G&D Chillers, which has set the standard on quality service and dedication to their customers' craft. You can download the free Tavora app today and get $10 in beer money with the code BREWING. Ska Fabricating is the craft industry's leading choice for packaging line automation, and Clarion Lubricants, the expert that experts trust. Thanks to all of them for helping us stay on the air. Steve Bischoff, lead brewer here at Root Down Brewing Company in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which, by the way, I didn't even get to talk to you about Phoenixville, but not only Sly Fox, but there's like 6 other breweries.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun
here.
town to come visit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's Iron Hill, who's got locations all over the place.
Sure.
A couple states. And I'm moving from one end of town to the other. So Iron Hill, Root Down, Crowded Castle, Steel City Coffee House now has a brewery as well. It's a small 1-barrel.
Okay.
And then we have Stable 12 at the other end of town, and then Rebel Hill, which is kind of not in town, but it's not far away either.
Okay.
Kind of over by the Sly Fox pub. Greg from Rebel Hill, great guy. He opened up about a year or so ago. So there's quite a few of us, and there's also the Bluebird Distillery.
Okay.
So it's a fun town to be in if you like to drink.
Hopefully enough hotels to manage it. But seriously, I haven't been here in years, and as I was looking at the map, I was like, holy crow.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew back then that you know now? If you could go back and talk to your young home brewer self, what would you tell him?
That's a tough one.
I gave you 3 minutes to prepare for this.
Yeah, I know.
While I was thanking our sponsors. This isn't like a surprise question. This wasn't a pop quiz. You had a minute to think about
I
this.
always just kind of sat in the back porch and did my own thing and brewed beer.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm finding out that the ladies actually really like brewers.
Okay.
So for many years, I was like, whatever. Didn't really push that fact. But now I'm finding out that,
Okay.
there's a lot of ladies out there that like the brewers, and they actually start drinking beer now. About the only thing I can think of.
Well, there it is. Steve Bischoff, lead brewer, your 2018 Mid-Size Brewer at the Mid-Size Brewery of the Year, winning for both silver in Salty by Nature, a Goza, and the Bine American IPA. Thanks for sitting down and talking with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to be back with you all after a couple weeks off, and I am eager to hear from you. You can reach out to me at John Hall, it's JOHNHOLL at beerandbrewing.com. You can follow the conversation on Twitter at John_Hall. You should also go to beerandbrewing.com. There you can subscribe to the magazine, both Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, and also our brewing industry guide for all of you pros out there who are curious about what other folks are doing to make the best beer possible and give the consumers the best possible experience. That's the brewingindustryguide.com as well. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And Steve, thanks again. Thanks for having me here at Root Down.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.